Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today we're going to be talking about IDP recap for Week 4, the studs, the duds, and the prediction for Week 5. With us today is IDP Jake. He is a content creator, fantasy football IDP content creator, for the IDP show and Reality Sports Online. Jake, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Guys, Steve, Joe, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. Can't wait to talk ball with you guys. I mean, I always want to talk ball, but especially with you guys. Just a bunch of fun guys. So,
hike.
Why don't you just start us right off, Jake? Who was the stud for you from Week 4?
For me, I'm going to go with the other Q Williams brother in New York, and that's Quincy Williams. He has just been on fire this year. This week, 13 tackles, 2 pass breakups, 2 tackles for loss, and nearly added a sack, but got the quarterback hit regardless. The big thing for me with Quincy has been, you looked at last year, he was someone who was a very efficient tackler, made some big plays, and you really liked what you saw from this guy week to week. But he was only doing it on about 70, 80, and then kind of at the end of the year, the last few weeks, he got up towards 90% snap rate. Now you're talking about a near 100% snap rate, maintaining some of that same efficiency year over year. And you saw what that can come out to for us in terms of actual IDP production. And Quincy Williams went off here in Week 4 against the Chiefs.
Yeah, when it comes down to him, I think he got a contract extension, I want to say, over this past offseason, decided to sign him long-term, staying with his brother in New York. It's interesting. Sometimes because Mosley is obviously the big name on that defense, and sometimes you can't really share. Both of them can't eat, right? But for everybody, he's been playing really well. Did great on Sunday night.
Yeah, he's really just been fun to watch. If you just watch the Jets games, I mean, this guy just flies sideline to sideline, racking up the tackles. He's a big physical player. I just enjoy really watching him.
Agreed.
Do you think, Jake, in your opinion, as far as Quincy Williams goes, is he a starter every week, or some people kind of on a border of whether to bench him or start him? Like, what would you say going forward? What's your thoughts with Quincy Williams?
So for me, at this level of utilization and that snap rate, I mean, he's a locked and loaded LB2 with LB1 upside going forward for the rest of the year until the Jets decide to pull him out of the lineup for some reason, which they should have no reason to at this point, or, knock on wood, injury bug decides to take him out of a lineup. So other than that, yeah, he should be a plug and play starter for us going forward.
Do you feel the same way, Joe?
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. I mean, I've got him, I think, in an IDP best ball league and maybe another league, and he's just been awesome for me so far.
Yeah, I mean, looking at his games here, I mean, he's had 10 solo tackles against the Chiefs. He had 7 against the Patriots, 7 against the Cowboys, and then 9 against the Bills. So I mean, that floor is pretty solid when you're talking about solo tackles.
My stud that I'm going with from Week 4 is going to be safety Harrison Smith. He had 14 tackles, 8 solo, 3 sacks, a forced fumble that led to a defensive touchdown as well. And just last week, Steve, you had this guy as a dud. I think he might have heard you because he balled out this week. This was the Harrison Smith, I've been waiting for to see. I've got him on a couple of different fantasy teams. Was disappointing start, but excited to see that. And then one encouraging sign as well from moving forward, I really like that he doubled his box snaps this week from the prior week. So getting closer to the line of scrimmage, hopefully we see him blitzing and getting those sack opportunities.
Yeah, good thing you didn't listen to me, Joe, or else being that he was a dud, you might have got that on your bench. I told you that maybe he's hitting a wall. One thing I didn't think about, and honestly, I know this sounds kind of bad of me, but it kind of just dawned on me while I was watching the game and I saw Brian Flores on the sideline. I was reminded. I was like, oh, wait, Brian Flores is the defensive coordinator. It didn't register for a second. I'm like, but maybe, that does change things. Anytime you have different coordinators, that does change the philosophy of the defense. So as a result, Harrison Smith has to learn a new defense. So that might have had something to do with, him not maybe producing as well as we thought early on. But yeah, no, he proved me wrong big time. He must have been listening to the show and put that on his bulletin board. He said, we're going to prove Steve wrong this week.
Absolutely. He's like, Steve Falco's recommended to bench me. We're changing that right now.
Oh, but I think you nailed it though. It is the defensive coordinator change, and maybe it is a little bit of an uptake on there because you look, he had 7 pass rush opportunities through the first 2 weeks in this new Brian Flores scheme, 15 and 19 respectively over the last 2 weeks in terms of pass rush opportunities. Obviously, we saw week 4 where that was a huge one, right? The 3 sacks you talked about. But you're talking he's got 31 through the first 4 games. His previous career high pass rush opportunities was 44 for an entire season. So I mean, this guy, he's knocking on new upside in terms of that big play. So yeah, I love that Harrison Smith call out.
So my stud from week 4, and how could I not say that he's I was gonna say 6 because there's a number why I was gonna say 6, but this guy, come on, it was Khalil Mack. I mean, he had 6 sacks, 6, count them. 3 hurries, 10 total tackles, which, really lumps him with a bunch of sacks that he had in a pass deflection. He had no sacks prior to the 3 games, and more impressively, no Joey Bosa that game either. So it's not like he even had somebody else, another running mate on the side to take off that pressure. Hard to not crown him. He did that unbelievable against the Raiders. Doesn't help Aiden O'Connell, the rookie. He struggled, which allowed Khalil Mack. He really held in the pocket for quite a long time, and then as a result, it was like a alligator about to eat a gazelle. Just seeing it go through and just clamped on him. So my thing though is, guys, this might be bold on my part, but I had Khalil Mack last season, so I can speak from experience. He can be a phantom sometimes. He just completely disappears. With IDP, it's feast or famine. And it reminds me a little bit of Chandler Jones, who I had a few years back, who got that 5-sack game that first week of the season and then disappeared for literally 6, 7, 8 games. So if you have him, I think he's a solid DN too, but I don't think he's I don't know. He's a matchup start for me. I don't know if I'm always going to start him. Maybe that's a hot take on my part, but I've been burned by him a few times. He's got the name recognition, but I don't think he's got the stats to really to show it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, right? Someone who played almost 1,000 snaps last year and he only racked up, I think, 40 tackles. That's a hard floor to swallow, right? At least in terms of expectation. So I think I'm with you with that boom bust, and you really got to look for the right matchup to play him. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Steve. You were the perfect person to talk about him. I've never been that high on Khalil Mack, so you had him last year. It's good that you talked about him, but yeah, it's hard to trust this guy, and you're going to have to pick and choose the right matchups for him to go off.
Well, he's one of those guys who have the huge name recognition, right?
Yep.
So people just because of the name recognition, it's like, oh, it's Khalil Mack, and so as a result, people get caught up into that. If I had him right now, especially he's older too. I want to say he's 30, 31 years old. I want to say, don't quote me on that. If I had him, 32, even older, I'd be trading him away. If somehow, some way, someone sees this and they get baited in and want to give you something like 6 sacks, ship him off, get something good for him, because this would be prime time to get rid of him.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
So are you enjoying this video so far? Well, if you are, show your support to our new channel by hitting the subscribe button and liking this video. We'll be creating videos all NFL season long, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So going over to the duds, Jake, what do you got for your dud?
For me, he was a hero last week for a lot of IDP people, but this week, not so much, at least in my opinion. Alex Highsmith only pulled in 3 total tackles, did have 3 quarterback hits. So, you think, okay, not terrible, right? But a little perspective for me, at least, against a weaker and depleted offensive line in Houston, I really thought this would be a game where Alex Highsmith would be able to make some hay. Again, we talked about Khalil Mack having just that high level of production in terms of the snaps he plays. Same thing. Highsmith is playing 80, 90, plus % of the snaps for the Steelers out there. You'd really kind of expect a little bit more. And the little even concerning part beyond that is, he had some pretty poor pass rush grades this week too per PFF. So this is something where it was a plus matchup. Didn't really get the production we were looking for, even though, again, had the hits, so maybe he was close to getting the sack, but doesn't look like it was something on his own merit, right? Maybe one of those longer running plays, or, Stroud's trying to extend it, whatever it was. So just all in all, not what we would like to see from Alex Highsmith this week.
Interestingly enough, Jake, this is the second time that a guest has come on and said that Alex Highsmith is a dud. Sticky Z came on last week, said he's a dud. You're saying he's a dud. Joe, do you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, I mean, this Texans offensive line has just been decimated so far to start the season, and it's been a plus matchup. And you'd think is running with having TJ Watt on the other side of the ball as well, that he'd be able to get his, and for him not to have good pass rush grades and win against, backup offensive linemen isn't a good sign.
It's interesting because I tend to think pretty highly of Highsmith. I think he's kind of under the radar. But based on what you guys are saying, would you, if you have him, Steelers are going up against the Ravens next week. Do you bench him or do you start him?
For me, I actually like to target a lot of teams that have those quarterbacks with high times of throws. So Lamar Jackson is one of the highest in the NFL, right? So he's close to like 3 seconds on average of time to throw. And that's kind of, I think, the situations where you see Highsmith win, right? Is those extended plays and longer times where the quarterback's holding onto the ball, because he's always kind of been, in my opinion, just a volume play, right? Like you look at how many fantasy points he earns per snap. He's actually very average to below average in that regard. It's just the fact that he's out there a ton. I'm not trying to knock the guy's talent. I think he's, a very respectable defensive player out there. But when it comes to IDP, I always have my limitations and expectations with Alex Highsmith.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I don't know what other people's options are going to be other than Alex Highsmith. But, if you have some other decent options, I definitely could justify benching him. Even though Lamar Jackson could take a long time to pass, he's also that athletic guy and hard to bring down to get those sacks at the same time. So,
yeah, I mean, I think unless you have somebody who you think is a really juicy matchup, I think I still start him. I think he's just because he plays across of TJ Watt, and he's been missing Cam Hayward this whole time. I mean, Cam Hayward with that interior pass rush makes a huge difference. He hasn't been there. He's been out with that groin injury. But very interesting. Joe, who's your dud?
Yeah, my dud, I'm going to go with Drake Jackson. He had 1 tackle this past week. He actually, didn't record a tackle or just goosed you in week 3. And it's just looking like that week 1 performance he had against the Steelers is kind of an anomaly at a 3-sack game. He's yet to record another sack in these other 3 games. He's a guy that I had high hopes for, was looking for the breakout year. There's still time for him to do it, but, just disappointing that he's not getting on the board and getting more involved with tackles at the very least.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. I mean, he was my stud from week 1. I was really impressed what he was able to do against the Steelers offensive line. But what we're seeing is the Steelers offensive line is the worst ranked based on PFF for pass blocking. So it's really not that impressive that you get 3 sacks against the worst offensive line. So that's concerning. So maybe Drake Jackson isn't as good as we once thought he was going to be. Obviously, he has this huge pedigree come out of USC. I think he's dealt with some weight issues that led him to kind of slide down. He's got all the talent in the world, but maybe he's just not putting it together.
Yeah, and I mean, especially this is another guy. He's got Nick Bosa on the other opposite side of the field. Javon Hargrave coming up the middle. It's like you talk about a bunch of athletic people along the front that should be able to create some space for him. I don't know, just don't know what his excuse is.
Yeah. And for me, when I look at weeks 3 through 4, right, you look at what he actually produced in terms of that pressure rate. So I always look at, how many pressures to how many pass rush opportunities, and what does it look like for him? He's right around what you'd expect for league average when you just look across all defensive linemen, right? He's at like 6.5%. I think the numbers when I run them usually come out about like 5.5%. So for that more quote unquote elite to great play, we love to see it start around 10 to 12% and jump up obviously to that 17-18% for your Nick Bosa's, your Max Crosby's. And so I think week 1 is looking like quite a bit of an anomaly at this point.
So going over to my dud is edge rusher, defensive end, Harold Landry. Had a decent matchup against the Bengals. He's been recovered from an ACL tear that he had last training camp, I want to say. On the year, he's only had 2 hurries. He had 2 tackles last Sunday. Harold Landry was a beast before he got injured. And then unfortunately, he suffered that injury in training camp. And he really has started off pretty slow. I just wonder if it's one of those things that got to wait a year maybe for him to be rehabilitated and really be his true self. But so far, very disappointing for Harold Landry. That defense, I was watching the game, seemed like Joe Burrow was getting clobbered left and right, but I guess it wasn't him.
Yeah, you're definitely not wrong on that, Steve. But I do think I did see him get close a couple of times, but just I think other people are beating him there.
Yeah, that's I mean, you talked about Khalil Mack, a big name, right, or someone who had some big performances in the past, and just kind of maybe fading into obscurity at this point, or at least just not what we're used to seeing, which is kind of disappointing because he's only going into his 5th season, right, and he's peaked at areas where he's had a 16 sack season in the past, so yeah, he might be washed up already in his 5th year if things keep trending this way. But hoping for the best for him. But yeah, I'm not putting him anywhere near any of my lineups anytime soon.
All right, guys. So going towards our predictions for Week 5, starting off with you, Jake. What is your IDP Pro tip of the week?
So I'm looking at the other Javon. We mentioned Javon Hargrave in San Francisco, but Javon Kinlaw. So actually produced 12 pressures so far, netting 0 sacks. So if we just look at just the general averages that we see across an NFL season, roughly about every 6 pressures we see that turn into a sack for a player. So the fact that he's netted 0 sacks so far, for me, this is just kind of a law of regression at this point. He's playing along a very talented line. Yes, maybe Drake Jackson isn't what we thought or hoped potentially after the week 1, but Nick Bosa is still Nick Bosa. Javon Hargrave has shown us he can dominate. And you look at Kinlaw's, numbers, right? He's got a 25% win rate when you look at actual, all across all defenders who have 50 plus pass rush opportunities so far this year, which nets him about 29th in the NFL. So that's not too bad a company to say you're the 29th best pass rusher straight up when you get a pass rush opportunity. So for me, the Cowboys O-line has allowed plenty of pressure opportunities so far too. And I think this is just one where I'm banking on the averages falling back into place for Kinlaw. I'm expecting at least 1 sack, maybe even a little bit more from here against the Cowboys in Week 5.
That's an interesting name, Jake. He has been, I'd say, well known as a bust, as a first round bust. I mean, he really has done absolutely nothing. Maybe all he needed was Javon Hargrave to be next to him. I mean, who couldn't perform next to Javon Hargrave? Real quick question, though. I don't know the stats off the top of my head. I don't know if you'd be curious. How much is Eric Armstead featuring into that defensive line? He kind of is he plays on the edge, but he also plays as interior. Is that impacting at all the snap volume that Kinlaw is getting? Is he rotating at this point, or I know I'm putting this on the spot on you, but I just was curious. Didn't know.
I'm pulling up the numbers right here. So, yeah, Armstead's getting about 40 snaps a game, and he's taking most of them over the B gap with them. So, I mean, they're basically rotating, but they're splitting kind of 50-50. Armstead looks like he's kind of kicking out over the tackle too, probably in more of those pass rush, obvious situations. And so is Kinlaw. So it's a 50-50 split. And, oddly enough, we're seeing exactly almost identical production from Armstead, right? So he's got 11 pressures and no sacks through the first game. So, hey, bonus tip, right? That might be another one who can fall into the regression candidate for us. So, I mean, that's the kind of great stuff you get here on the Front Office Pros. So,
yeah, that's right,
absolutely.
Jake. That's right.
But yeah, Kinlaw is an interesting name. I feel like a lot of people just kind of wrote him off because he's just been a disappointment and ready to move on for him. But I guess we'll see if that he ends up getting that sack there. And
yeah, I like to do my dirty digging deep in some of these lineup stuff. Everyone knows to play Nick Bosa. Everyone knows to play Myles Garrett. I'm going to find you someone that you're like, I don't know that I want to put this guy on my roster. That's the kind of stuff I like to come up with.
And nice. I like it.
Now we know who to ask when we're thinking about whether we should start or not, right, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely, and you give us some deep dives too.
I mean, you found some diamonds in the rough last year. You're a big fan of Dorrance Armstrong. I want to say you also picked up Nate Hobbs last year. You had a couple diamonds in the rough you found.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Unfortunately, Dorrance Armstrong's not performing as well this year, but maybe he'll get back to it. He showed out week 1, but then it's kind of been a ghost these past 2 weeks here. But my pro tip of the week is I'm going to predict that Dennis Gardeck keeps this hot streak going. He's recorded a sack in 3 of the 4 games this year. And I think he gets another one on Joe Burrow. Just the Bengals O-line's not looking good. They just allowed 3 sacks to the Titans, as you mentioned there, Steve. And just Burrow doesn't look right with that calf. He just, trying to get rid of it quickly, but he doesn't have that escapability anymore. And, Gardeck's not really a guy I knew about up until this year, but man, has he made his name well known so far.
Wait, Joe Burrow doesn't have the escapability anymore? You think he's getting too old, Joe?
No, the calf.
I know.
What do you mean?
I'm just pulling your leg.
Oh.
Don't pull Joe's leg. That won't end up well.
Yeah. I pulled Joe Burrow's leg. He needs a pull in the right direction to get that team up and running. But I'm with you. I was leery of Joe Burrow's calf from the beginning. You told me otherwise, that it wasn't a big deal. So I had to give you a little bit of trouble there for that. But I'm glad you're seeing, the light. You've turned around and you've seen that it's a problem. And as a result, I like your prediction for Dennis Gardeck.
And how can you go wrong? I mean, his nickname's the Barbarian, right? So, I mean, that's just. I learned that from my good friend Evan Ronda. So he's out in Arizona and he gets all that Cardinals talk. So Dennis the Barbarian Gardeck. Yep.
I never heard that, but I definitely fits the bill.
I was gonna say that nickname fits. I didn't know that either, but man, he just plays with like his hair's on fire out there and flies all over.
So my IDP Pro tip of the week is to go ahead and start linebacker Patrick Queen. He's a PFF grade of 72.2, and according to PFF, he's on pace to have his best ever season. He has more total snaps, believe it or not, than Roquan Smith, which I thought was quite surprising, and is 4th in the league with 283 snaps. He's tied 8th in total pressures for inside linebackers, and he's in a contract year. And Joe, as we know what that means, he's going to be balling out so he can cash out. David Ojabo was placed on injured reserve recently. Jason Owe has been out for consecutive games due to an ankle injury. Ravens are facing the worst offensive line in football. We've talked about them, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their offensive line pass blocking has been brutal, and now Kenny Pickett is either not playing or will be extremely limited with mobility due to that knee injury. Last week, Patrick Queen had 5 total tackles and a sack. Look for him to do it again. And partially because the pass rushers are vacant, so they need to create some sort of pressure. So I think they're gonna. I know he's not an edge rusher; he's interior, but I believe that they're gonna send him because they need to create some sort of pressure, and so that's why I believe he'll do well.
Yeah, and I really like Patrick Queen more as that second linebacker in that defense. I don't know why. I just feel like ever since he's kind of not had the pressure of being the guy with Roquan coming in, I just feel like he's been able to reset himself and just focus on, hey, I'm an amazing pass rusher. I'm an athlete who can play sideline to sideline really well, and just going out there and playing loose. And I think he's really shown in his game. Like you said, his PFF grades are the best they've been ever. So you like to see that for Queen.
Yeah, I like to call it Steve. And another guy, I've got him in the RSO league. Been playing him at linebacker. He's been good, but yeah, something you've seen the Ravens have to bring him on blitzes. Kyle Hamilton's been on blitzes, and they've been trying to manufacture that pass rush from other places.
I gotta say, I am surprised by Queen's production, though. He must have felt like he was being put on notice because when they draft Trenton Simpson out of Clemson, that was a surprising pick to me. Mind you, it might be one of those things where like, okay, we're not going to re-sign Patrick Queen, but Patrick Queen had been quite a disappointment before they went ahead and traded for Roquan Smith. So there are a lot of puzzling moves around there, but man, he's given the Ravens a tough decision because he's really performing very, very well at a high level. He really turned it around, in my opinion. So that does it for our IDP recap. We went through our studs, our duds, and our IDP Pro tips of the week to help you win your matchups in Week 5. Jake, thanks again so much for joining the show. Where can others find your great work?
All right. So, yeah, you can head over to theidpshow.com. I do a start sit article there every week. Sign up for the newsletter for free there to get that kind of content. There's also more premium content you can find me on there. I do the preview pod in their free stream as well. So check that out on Spotify or Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. And then over at Reality Sports Online, you can check out my articles there as well.
Very nice. Well, if you don't do that, do it now. And go ahead and follow Jake on Twitter. He's at LateRoundDB. We'll be back next week with another guest, going through another IDP recap with our pro tips of the week. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.